what I learned um, from yesterday's lecture was basically um, uh, the same thing. What brother mentioned, that um, um, that the salah and also the hijrah, um, that um, that if we are in um, position to do the hijrah, we should do the hijrah, because Allah's uh, uh, Zameen, Allah's earth is very wide, and you will be able to find, if you are persecuted, you should do the hijrah for the betterment.
Okay, mashallah, good. طيب. So we'll go back. We're here on ayah number 127, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَيَسْتَفْتُونَكَ فِي النِّسَاءِ قُلْ اللَّهَ يُفْتِيكُمْ فِيهِنَّ وَمَا يُتْلَى عَلَيْكُمْ في الكتاب في يتامى النساء التي لا تؤتونهن ما كتب لهن وترغبون أن تنكحوهن والمستضعفين من الولدان وأن تقوموا لليتامى بالقسط وما تفعلوا من خير فإن الله كان به عليما. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they ask you for a ruling about women. Say, Allah Himself gives you a ruling about them. You already have what has been recited to you in the scripture about orphans in your charge, from who you withhold the prescribed shares of their inheritance, and whom you wish to marry, and also about helpless children. So Allah instructs you to treat orphans fairly. He is well aware of whatever you do. What's going on here? What is he talking about here? Why don't we go back to Aziz?
Um, I'm not really sure. I'm guessing it's I guess when you become a guardian of an orphan.
Okay.
And you're and now this specifically talks about girl, but I think in general as well. Mm-hmm. And how you have to deal with them.
Okay, so part of the situation, or a little bit of the setup here, is that, okay, if you are the ward, if you're in charge of this orphan, and then she comes of age and you want to marry her, right?
Yep.
How do you deal with that situation? Because the problem is that you've been caring for her. Not only have you been caring for her, you've been caring for her wealth or whatever she had inherited, right? So how does that fall in line with what we have been discussing regarding the surah?
So it's just so when they get up to the marriage age, it's basically, even if you marry her, her inheritance is hers.
Okay, good.
You can't just take over. Or I guess the other thing I'm also thinking is you just can't marry her just to take over the inheritance.
Good. So you have to make sure that your intention is what?
It's pure.
Right, you have to make sure your intention is pure. And remember, we had talked about this many times. Throughout the surah, we find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who is He talking to?
You mean for in general in this ayah, or?
No, in general, who's He addressing?
It's us, man.
Right, He's addressing men. And why is that?
Because we are the qawam of women.
Okay, qawam the women. In this situation that Allah is presenting to us, what's going on? We have full authority, right? Is there anybody to tell us or dictate to us on what to do and how to do it?
No, not in this scenarios. We mostly have the
right. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he turns this 180 degrees. Like, so Sa'ad, the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَإِنْ امْرَأَةٌ خَافَتْ مِنْ بَعْلِهَا نُشُوزًا أَوْ إِعْرَاضًا فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا أَنْ يُصْلِحَا بَيْنَهُمَا صُلْحًا وَالصُّلْحُ خَيْرٌ وَأُحْضِرَتِ الْأَنْفُسُ الشُّحَّ وَإِنْ تُحْسِنُوا وَتَتَّقُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرًا. That if a wife fears high-handedness or alienation from her husband, neither of them will be blamed if they come to a peaceful settlement, for peace is best. Although human souls are prone to selfishness, if you do good and are mindful of Allah, He is well aware of what you do. So how is this very different from the previous ayah, and what does this have to do with the previous ayah, Asad?
So the previous ayah was more talking about orphans and how we should treat the orphan girls. While this is that, say now you have your wife and she fears that she's there's high-handedness coming from you. And this is more of how she should deal with that. So it's kind of two different aspects of that I was talking about, like I guess.
No, mashallah, that's very good. So the ayah previously, who's Allah talking to?
Men.
Talking to men, and in this verse, who is he talking to?
Women.
He's talking to the women. Good. And I think that's really important, to keep that in mind and to point that out. And what exactly is the point of discussion here? What is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about?
Well, how to deal with these relations and there any issues that may arise.
Okay, so what's interesting here and what really stands out for me is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after all of these verses, where was the last time that Allah mentions high-handedness? You remember?
It wasn't like around like ayah 30 or something.
Right, it was much earlier in the surah. It was much earlier in the surah. Almost 100 ayahs later, now Allah is talking about the same thing, but who is he addressing?
Women.
The women. So meaning what? Or what is one benefit that you can take away from that? Why don't you call in the next person?
Oh, let's go with Brother Asif.
Yeah, could you repeat the question?
So, okay, so about Allah, he's talking, saying that if you fear from your wife, nushuz, if you fear high-handedness from your wife. And over here now, much later in the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's talking to women saying that if you fear from your husband, high-handedness. What does that tell us?
In the beginning, they said if you fear high-handedness from your wife. That was in the beginning.
Yeah. Or what do you think about that?
Maybe it was mentioned first because it's more important. Because high-handedness generally comes, don't men have the right to raise their hand to the woman?
Okay.
Under circumstances?
Under certain circumstances, right? And what those circumstances have to be what?
If the wife is endangering the safety of,
if she's being disrespectful, I mean, very, very simply, if she's being disrespectful, he has the right to do that. Only when what? Though, what's the condition? I don't want you to come away from this whole discussion of Surah Nisa. It's okay for me to hit my wife.
Yeah, only when it's appropriate.
Okay, what is appropriate? What defines that?
It depends on the circumstances and the situation.
Okay, what are some of those things?
You can't abuse that power that you have. So that's where
it can't be abuse. Number one, good. I agree with you. What else?
You have to be fair, and you have to know when and why you're doing it. So you have to.
It's all right, Taib, no problem. Call in the next person. Let's see what others have to say.
What I said.
I'm kind of worried, Asif, when you get married.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so what I understood is basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying that the men has to be, follow the insaf. They have to do the insaf, and you have to be, steadfast to do the adl, and there shouldn't be any like self-righteousness.
Everything you're saying is right, but I'm still want the fundamental question: when can I do this? You're talking about, okay, these are the conditions that the man needs to have, and he needs to do that. Fine, I agree, but when is he allowed to strike his wife?
Well, he should never strike his wife.
Allah tells me to. What are you going to do?
Well, okay. So the only time I would think is that when she break the covenant between the husband and wife, and go do something which is not legal.
Is it nushuz? It says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, and if you fear high-handedness, right? If you feel disrespect, and I know that there are a few scholars who do say that this only applies to when they are cheating on their spouse, but that is a very minority opinion. I don't know too many scholars who say that, but most of them say that high-handedness is a type of disrespect. But go ahead, let's call in the next person. Let's see. I'm kind of upset that you guys didn't take away the main point of the of what right.
Would it be to help mend the relationship? That's the only time you can actually use it.
Right, that's the only time. Ahsant, yes, it's the only time you're allowed to use it is if it will actually bring islah, if it will actually mend the relationship. If I strike my wife and it makes the relationship worse, then I can't use that. Right, that at that point it completely defeats the purpose, because all of those points and all of those rules, all of those recommendations that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala gives us, He gives us those recommendations so that we use them to preserve the marriage. And if by me striking her, I am not preserving the marriage, then I cannot do it. Very simple. Well, I think that's something that's really important. And the other thing that points out that Asif had mentioned earlier that I think is really important, that nushuz, this idea of being disrespectful, it applies to both the husband and it can apply to the wife, right? It doesn't apply to just one or the other. And even Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, the reason He mentions it much earlier, with women, and Asif had, he kind of indicated this, is that this is something that happens a little bit more often. Why does that happen more often? Or why do we see it happening more often where a woman will be disrespectful to her husband versus a husband being disrespectful to his wife? Or is that not the case?
But I don't understand, like the point that you just raised, that is striking would mend the relationship. I don't think that would help in any way. I mean, there could be other
right,
punishment or other things that you can do.
But I'm saying it won't help for you. There are a number of situations, there are a number of studies that have been done where women actually expect their husband to do that. And I'm not condoning this, and I'm not saying that this is the best way to do it, but does it help in certain situations, and does it help with certain relationships? Yeah, it does. And this religion is something that's universal. It's not something that is for the American culture or for the Italian culture or for the Tanzanian culture, right? This is universal, and it is meant to be timeless. It is meant from the time of the Prophet ﷺ until Yawm al-Qiyamah. And are there situations where women would tolerate this and they would expect it and it would end the relationship? Yes, there are. And I mean, I've dealt with some of these cases personally where it's not a case of abuse, and it happened like once, right? It happened once off, it happened twice off. And the woman, she was not bruised in any way. And at the end of the day, I was asked, okay, what do I do? I said, and I told the sister, I said, it's up to you. I said, if you want to call the police and you want to file an abuse case, you are more than welcome to do that, right? And you have the right to that. But if you do not feel that you have been abused, if you do not feel you have been abused, and you do not feel that these conditions have happened, like if there is nothing that's been broken, if there are no bruises, right, and he was reacting to something you were doing to, if you were slapping him, if you were hitting him, if you were cursing him, if you were threatening him, right? Because this happens, where people they escalate in their fight, right? They escalate in their fight, and sometimes to a response to that by some men will be that they do this, and for some women it works. For some women it just makes things worse. And again, I'm not here to condone this. Every individual and every relationship is very unique. And I do not condone abuse at all. Abuse is haram. Abuse is something that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has strictly prohibited. And at the end of the day, the woman always has the opportunity to file an abuse case. Always. Even in an Islamic court system, right? If a husband strikes her, she is more than welcome to go to the judge and be like, my husband abused me, I want out of this relationship. And that happens. And the judge will rule in her favor. So, to say universally, like, I can't see where this will apply. That's fine. I mean, you can apply that to yourself, but this is something that, again, I'm telling you that there are studies that have been done. There was a study that was done recently within the past 5 years I believe it was in Kenya or Nigeria, I'm sorry, where they asked Muslims, they asked Christians, they asked pagans, right? And they said all of them, like, do you expect your husband to strike you? Not to abuse you, to strike you if you are disrespectful, you fall out of line. A vast majority of them said yes. Is it good? Is it bad? Wallahu alam, I don't know. As long as nobody's rights are being taken, as long as nobody's being abused, then this is something that is recommended. The prophetic example is the excellent example, right? That's the best example, that he ﷺ never struck any of his wives, and that's the best way. But there are many things the Prophet ﷺ did that we don't follow, right? And like, for example, he used to make nightly qiyam. Very few of us who make nightly qiyam. He ﷺ never took revenge for anything that anybody did to him, right? And we have full right to take revenge. And the reason that he was like that, because obviously he had perfect character, and we should try to mimic it the best as possible, the best we can. But many of us will fall short in that. But that doesn't mean that we are taking anybody's rights. It doesn't mean that we're abusing anyone. And this is something that's really important. And I'll draw another parallel to this, is that even Islamically, we have a right to spank our children. And even here in the United States, you have many laws that will support parents spanking their children. And the thing is, the purpose behind the spank or the purpose behind the strike when it comes to the wife, the purpose is ta'deeb, right? The purpose is to bring somebody back to the good, right? If you're doing it and it's just making the situation worse, then that's not something that's going to help that. That's not the purpose behind it. Some people even argue, just like you mentioned, okay, well, I can't see a situation where it'll work like this. There are many parents who will argue, I can never see a situation where I can hit my kid and it'll make it better. Right. But the thing is, you have a number of parents where it has worked for them. And you have to understand that just because we have a certain cultural viewpoint behind something, or we have something negative behind it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong, right? It's not universally wrong. So we have to keep all of those things in mind when we talk about these verses, because these verses are very clear, right? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about these things, and he's talking about situations very clearly.
One thing, I'm going to point out again that I understood, that you can't just, if the first attempt, if your wife is misbehaved or have an ill conduct the first time, you drive away, start slapping her. You have to go gradually, maybe, first maybe admonish.
Yeah, that's the verse is clear, right? That's what the verse says. The verse says to admonish. The verse says to leave the bed, right?
Leave the bed, right.
The first step isn't, start hitting. And the thing is, if that is your first step, you really need to reanalyze yourself.
Correct. Okay.
Right? If this is the first thing if your first reaction to anything is to hit, right? That's a self problem, right? That's not a problem with the relationship. That's a problem with me.
Okay, I couldn't catch that actually, the what you're mentioning now. So I thought, so the first you admonish and then you refuse to share the bed, then
those are they all come in the verse. And then the third thing that is mentioned, and then فَضْرِبُوهُنَّ, and then strike them.
To beat lightly. Okay.
Yeah. So the thing is, a strike is a strike, and we know what the Prophet ﷺ, he explained what that means, in different hadith, and you do have abuse cases during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? You do have abuse cases where women came and they said to the Prophet ﷺ that he beat me and I went out of this marriage, and the Prophet ﷺ granted her the talaq. He granted her the divorce. So there are situations where that did happen, and it's very important for anybody who is in a position of authority that they don't take advantage of that and they don't abuse anyone, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So can I make a point? Maybe I'm wrong, but I just find very interesting is every time when we have a discussion similar to these topics, we have we are too polarized one way or another. And one thing that amazed me when you actually read the Quran, it does talk about reaction, but then every time when Allah Ta'ala discusses these, he also talks about the prevention.
Yes.
And we don't focus on the prevention, that, why this relation of marriage is created and how to even get into those situations. So Allah Ta'ala always talks about how we should be fearing Allah and why we should staying away from the greed. These amazing topics, if we teach our kids and ourselves, most of the situation we will never fall into where we need to go to this reaction.
I agree. And the thing is, all of these relationships, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he talks about nikah, when he talks about marriage, when he talks about talaq, when he talks about divorce, when he talks about rida, when he talks about, the breastfeeding, what does he connect all of those things to? What does he connect all those relationships to? Aziz?
To taqwa.
Right, that should be foundational behind all of these things. So what should be our motivation when we are doing those things? What should be our motivation when I'm ignoring my wife? What should be my motivation if my wife looks for a peaceful settlement? What should be the motivation behind all of these things?
Yeah, it should be taqwa, like even within divorce.
Taqwa, right?
Even doing it.
Even in divorce. Look at, even in divorce, the motivation should be what?
That so after divorce I can have taqwa, better taqwa if I'm not getting it.
Even through the divorce, the reason that I'm divorcing is because I want to draw nearer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this relationship is not helping me do that. So imagine if we changed the way that we viewed a lot of these things. Do you think we would have the marriage problems that we have today?
No, I think most of it would be gone.
Right, most of it would be gone. Most of these issues would be solved. Because the thing is, even if people divorce, they would divorce how?
That would be for the sake of Allah.
It would be very cordial, right? You wouldn't have like, oh, they're trying to get all their money. And it's subhanAllah, the number of cases that have come to me that are divorce cases where they use the children as pawns, right? They literally use their children as pawns, trying to keep their children away from their husband or keep their children away from their wife, and how they'll use them to hurt their spouse. There's no seeking Allah's face in that. It's very clear. Their purpose behind the divorce is just to hurt the other person. And it's really sad how we have this entire surah that is talking about this and not taking advantage of other people, and how hard we work to take advantage of them. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from being from those people and make us from those who are righteous and those who are always trying to achieve taqwa. Ameen.
Ameen. I had a quick question to that real quick.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So, I mean, going off of that, what have you ever heard of any cases where, let's say, there is some dispute going on, and the man does resort to striking as a last resort, but only for the good intention that it will resolve the conflict. But when it happens, the woman, it doesn't actually resolve the conflict. It makes it worse.
Yes. So what happens is that she goes forward and she files a abuse case against the husband.
Okay, but then in that case, doesn't that mean that in Islamic terms, in Islamic terms, he's wrongly accused because
he could. So what would happen in an Islamic court of law is that you would have both of the husband and the wife. They would come forward. She would file an abuse case against him. The judge would order a medical exam of the wife. Mm-hmm.
Right.
After he orders the medical exam, if the medical exam came back saying that no, she has no bruises, she has no broken bones, so there is no case of abuse here, but she still has a right to the divorce, right? Okay. Because she's saying that she's been struck and she's been hit.
Right, but I'm assuming after she's been struck, there's no other option other than the divorce, right?
For her? No, I mean for her, she can decide to stay in the marriage. So the thing is, okay. I've had two very specific cases. The husband was not abusive, right? The husband was not abusive. What had actually happened was that the wife, she struck first, right? One case where she was scratching him and she was in his face. So he struck her and she stopped. There was another case where she was in his face, like yelling, and he struck her and she stopped. Neither of those sisters decided to pursue the case. Neither of them called the police. And it didn't escalate any further than that, but they did come to see me.
Right.
And I told the sisters the same thing in both cases. I said, listen, the decision is up to you on how you want to proceed.
Okay.
And I'll support you either way. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Right. I'll support you either way. If you feel that you've been abused, I said, then you have full right to seek intervention from the police. And I'm not going to look down on you in any way. If you feel it was a one-off thing, right? And this is something, has he been habitually doing this? Right, that this is something that is also very important.
Right.
I'm not encouraging any of you to be marriage counselors, obviously, but if this is something that is habitual, many times women will make the excuse that, oh no, it was my fault. But if I'm seeing a pattern, right, if I'm seeing a pattern where this woman is continuously struck, I will call the police myself.
Okay.
Because the thing is, there's a difference. Sometimes you have that victim mentality, saying that, oh, it was my fault that he gets so upset. It's not. I mean, no sister should ever feel that things are happening time and time again, and she's continuously blaming herself. That is wrong, right? You are not wrong at that point. At that point, you need to get the police involved. But if there's no history, there's no previous history of abuse, there's no previous history of striking, and it was clearly a reaction to how she was being aggressive toward him, in that situation, I would leave it up to the sister to say, okay, listen, you need to make a judgment call here.
Okay, got it.
Is that?
Yeah, that answered it.
Okay. Over here, though, another thing that I did want to point out is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he talks about the system and the way of dealing. So we talked about in the previous ayah, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's addressing the man saying, this is how you should deal with your wife. And he's giving us 1, 2, 3, 4. Over here, the way that a wife should deal with her husband, it's not the same, right? It's totally different. And I guess we'll just continue with you, Hassan. All right?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. So in the previous verse that had talked about a woman's high-handedness and a woman's disrespect for her husband, Allah said, okay, first remind her, then leave her bed, and then strike her, right? We had all of those things in order.
Right.
But over here, the reverse situation, you don't have those same options.
Oh, so.
Right, so look over here in verse number 128.
Okay. Wife hears handedness. Come to. So are you asking why he doesn't mention those options again?
Why not give the same options to the woman? Why are her options different? And what does that tell us? What are some benefits we can take away from that?
I guess
if you don't know, it's not a problem. You can call in the next person, inshallah.
Okay, yeah, I'm drawing blanks.
Still too soon after Iftar?
Yeah, that's true.
Go ahead, man.
I'll call on Sister Saifa.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay. Question: What are the requirements for a wife on how to handle a husband? You said the reverse role.
Yeah.
So.
What can she do? Like if her husband, like for example, if you have a situation with Khadija and Ahmed is being totally disrespectful to his wife. He calls her names. He doesn't appreciate her. He's not necessarily physically abusive, but he is definitely mentally and verbally abusive. So what can she do in this situation?
If I may just share my own personal experience with my ex-husband, I decided to go to his family.
Okay.
And I said, this is what it is, this, that. But, they said, okay, well, especially our Bangladeshi culture, they're like, okay, well, he's the man of the house, you have to put up with it. And that answer was not good enough for me. So I just went ahead and when he finally physically struck me, I called the police and I filed the order of protection against him. And I feel that as a Muslim woman, that was my right.
No, you have that right. You completely have that right. I don't disagree with that at all. And I feel that the family was wrong for saying that you have to put up with abuse, because this verse is very clear, right? If you look at verse number 28 here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says very clearly, if you feel disrespect or alienation from your husband, meaning that he's not giving you the time of day, he's just completely abandoned you, he does not giving you any time, and when he speaks to you, he disrespects you. He said neither of them will be blamed if they come to a peaceful settlement. For peace is best. A peaceful settlement. What is Allah indicating here? What is He telling us?
Try to resolve it first, I guess, right? Try to resolve the situation first.
And what is one way of resolution?
Well, wait. Does that apply like after one of the spouses being hostile, or just a simple argument?
No. This is after hostility, because the thing is, a one-off case. Would you describe this man as being disrespectful, and would you describe him as alienating his wife because of one fight? Do you think that's fair?
I guess it depends on the degree.
I mean, think about it. Do we base people, or do we judge people based off of one action that they did? Or
no. Actually, no.
Right? We don't. That's not fair. But if somebody is habitual, right? If he's habitually being disrespectful, because all of us have had bad days, right?
Yes.
Right, and all of us will come home sometimes, and all of us will say something that we shouldn't have said.
Right.
But a normal person, what is he going to do?
Generally, they would say, okay, fine, maybe he had a bad day, or maybe, maybe I was being too hostile. That provoked him or provoked her.
Okay, no. So that's from you as a wife. But let's say the husband did that, right? He came home because he had a bad day at work and he was disrespectful and he called his wife a name and it's something out of character, something that he doesn't normally do. What do you think that this husband would do later on in the day or later on in the week? If he's a normal person.
If he's a normal person, he would just fess up and say, what I did was wrong, and he would apologize.
Yeah, he would apologize. I mean, and that's the thing that normal people do, right? When they feel like, okay, I transgressed the bounds, I did something I shouldn't have done, and I should apologize. You can't describe this for you. A woman, can she hold him hostage now and be like, no, you called me an idiot? Is that even fair?
Oh, no.
No, absolutely not. But if he's doing this habitually and he's not apologizing, then at that point, they need to come to a peaceful settlement. And one of the options of a peaceful settlement sometimes is a divorce.
Correct.
Right? So, and that's what Allah is indicating here, even though he doesn't say clearly, right? He doesn't say openly. He said, but if you are looking for a way to do islah, if you're looking for a way to come to a peaceful agreement, sometimes that peaceful agreement can be divorce. Because sometimes two Muslims can be good people, right? But is it necessary that they're good together?
No.
No, absolutely. Like, Jazakallah. Thank you for sharing your experience. I hope we
yes. No problem.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. You want...
No. Actually, my question is, I understand that sister does have the right to go ahead and just leave her husband or report an abuse against her husband, even if he struck her just once. But isn't it a little more complex than that? Because what if the sister is like being extremely hostile and he had no other choice but to strike her? So she's the one who's being hostile. So why should she have the right to file for an abuse when?
So the thing is, I see what you're saying. The problem isn't the fact that is.
And vice versa, of course, vice versa.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So the problem isn't the fact that that's being done. The problem is the system that we're in.
Oh.
Right. That's the bigger problem. Meaning that in a normal Islamic.
No, I'm talking about in Islam.
Okay, so within an Islamic paradigm, let's talk about within an Islamic system, and then I'll talk
during
about
the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I think you mentioned that he allowed sisters to.
So they could file cases against their husband, but the thing is, what would happen is that he can justify and he can defend himself now, right? He has the right to do that. And if they find that, okay, no, abuse did not happen, then sometimes they could put a penalty toward a wife because she now slandered her husband.
Oh, okay. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Now, the problem with the current dynamic, now I'm moving out of the Islamic paradigm and I'm moving into...
I know, the modern times, yes.
The modern times, what happens is a vast majority of the time, if a woman files an abuse case against her husband, what is going to happen?
Well, I know they generally do investigations. Oh, well, no, not.
They do. No, they do. Don't get. They do a medical exam. They do all of those things. But even if they don't find many things, there are many times where they will still rule in the favor of the woman. They will grant the restraining order. They will take away the children. And the thing is, I know cases like this. I personally know cases, and I know the opposite also, where the man actually won and he proved that there was no abuse. He was able to prove that. So I've seen both, and I know that we hear on the news. Vast majority of the cases where the woman comes, she files for alimony, she gets the kids, she gets over half of his wealth, et cetera, and that does happen. And that's oppression, right? So we have to be careful of that, and we also have to be careful of the opposite. But at the end of the day, that's the individual responsibility, and we have to make sure that we're not hurting anyone, inshallah. But that's what would happen in a Islamic system. Okay. So the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he talks about you are unable to treat your wives equally. So how is it possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to marry four if we can never treat them equally? Allah is telling us. So why don't you call in the next person? Let's see what they have to say about the verse.
Let's see. Sister Shalis.
Assalamu alaikum. What's the question?
So the question is on verse number 129. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, you will never be able to treat your wives with equal fairness, however much you desire to do so, but do not ignore one wife altogether, leaving her suspended, meaning that you don't treat her like she's married to you, and you don't treat her as from you. If you make amends, remain conscious of Allah. If you have taqwa, He is most forgiving and most merciful. How is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to marry four wives when He Himself says very clearly in this verse that you will never be able to treat them equally?
I really don't know how to answer that. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's not a problem. Can you call in the next person?
Okay. Saad.
Saad? Okay.
Okay, so if I understand, was that me?
Yes.
Okay, so if I understand from the ayah where he talked about allowing us to marry 4 wives, wasn't it that he said that you're only allowed to marry those 4 multiple wives if you can treat them fairly and justly?
Okay, and then over here Allah says, but you can't treat them fairly and justly.
So I feel like this is more or less just saying, since the prerequisites of marrying 4 wives is that you can only marry them if you can treat them fairly and justly, and now he's telling us you'll never be able to do that. So it's just him saying like, you just can't, don't do it. It's
But
not recommended.
Why mention it at all? Why not just say you can only marry 1 wife?
Because
you understand the problem?
yeah, I mean, at least in the time of back then, right? There were some circumstances where you taking upon multiple wives was more of like something that, like, circumstances Prophet when he married, the only, if I'm correct, the only wife he married out of his own interest was Aisha, right?
I would say the only wife. I mean, obviously he was interested in all his wives.
Well, yeah, but yeah, you know what I'm trying to say, right?
The only virgin he married was Aisha. That is correct.
Yeah, so like, I mean, I guess that's the kind of side. Some people just marry because, like, say there's a widow and she has a family and she needs help. Sometimes some of the Sahabi will just marry her to be able to help their family, or something like that.
Is it? But even then, you have multiple wives, and even then, you won't be able to treat them fairly, regardless of how noble your intention is.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just don't do it.
I married 4 widows who are all orphans, and they all have 7 children. Right? There's nothing more noble than that.
Yeah, you're right.
Allah has told me that I can't treat them equally, so I have to divorce 3 of them now.
I mean, you could just you could try playing Uno with all of them, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, Allah, he obviously means something. It's not possible that Allah will say, okay, hey, you can do this with this condition, but this condition can actually never be fulfilled. Right?
Yeah, that's true. I'm not too sure, yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. There has to be something that is intended behind this. Go ahead, call on the next person. Let's see what some more people.
Let's go with Brother Aziz.
So the way I look at this, it's there's 2 things, right? One is your emotion you love, and
Okay.
even Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he was asked who he loves the most at one time, and it was Hazrat Aisha Radhiyallahu anha, even though he had other wives.
Yes.
So with the heart and emotions, we don't have much control. However, we do have control on how we spend our time and money. And this is where it's talking about that we have to do justice when we're distributing the wealth and the time.
Okay, well, the wealth, I'll argue with you a bit, but the time, I think, is something that's very important. But how did you get that from this verse? How do you understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, when he's talking about being just here, he's talking about being just in your heart? Meaning, I haven't given more space to one wife over another in my heart.
But just from the seerah of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as well.
No, that's good. I agree with you 100%, but I think it's very important also that we look at this verse and we can take that out of the verse also.
Yeah, it says because you cannot be too inclined towards one.
Okay, in what way? I think being inclined toward one, I can do that with my heart also, right? But we have to make clear, and this verse is not talking about something else, right? Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where he's saying that you'll never be able to treat them justly, he's talking about in your hearts.
But you have to do justice, and justice, it's financial justice talking about, and the time, and
how do you know he's talking about time though?
Because that's one of the that's how should I put it on? I mean, that's the relationship with when you husband.
I want from the verse, man. I want from this verse. I want you to prove it to me.
Oh. I don't know how can I prove it from this verse because I'm not that smart. But that's why I need the help of Prophet Muhammad to help me.
Maybe Allah will open your heart to help you understand this. Call on the next person. Let's see what some of the other brothers and sisters have to say.
Let me see. brother Sohaib.
Okay.
Okay. So what I understood is basically men in this verse basically can marry more than one wife and on the four wives, but it's possible that he will not be able to do justice because maybe one wife is prettier than the other, and one is young and the other one is the others are much older, or maybe they have some sort of a sickness. Maybe one is very
Sohaib, are you talking from experience?
No, not experience.
Go ahead, continue.
Not at all. So and it's possible that one is healthy and the other has some. Maybe one is very what you call
very sickly,
very hard-minded, or the one is very jolly. One wife is very jolly. Okay. So,
but what are you talking about justice here? I think that's very important for us to define. You said, okay, how do I be just?
So this is what these conditions based on, because men automatically be her heart will go towards
toward
one or the other. Yes.
Okay, I agree with you 100%. But I want you to prove to me that this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is saying to us that you will not be able to be just with your hearts, but we are accountable for our time. Right, or according to Aziz, even for our how we spend on them, that we have.
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I would say that the love and the affection, it's not necessary that you will keep the same. I think Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is saying that you don't show disrespect or. I don't know what is it in English, like raghba.
No, I'm saying you should be good with her, right?
Yeah, you should be good with her, and you have to keep her as a wife, and as wife, and the minimum relationship, so that she would not be looks like that she's without a husband.
Okay, so you're making a very good point here. That she needs to look like, or her situation needs to be clear, that it doesn't seem like she's without a husband. Now, how do I define that? How would I define if a woman is with or without a husband?
Basically, that you are not taking care of her. You're not, spending time with her.
Not what? Spending time with her.
Yes.
And how did you take that from this verse? How did you understand this from this verse?
Well, that's obvious, when between husband and wife, the relationship only stood when you do these kind of thing.
Okay, but I went from this verse. How can it be obvious? Why don't you call on the next person? I agree with everything you said.
I wanted to take a guess real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
I mean, I didn't get it from this verse, but just from context, based on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the previous verses, like he spent quite a number of ayat talking about resolving conflicts with one wife. So since all these ayats are being used, I'm assuming that's a lot of time for that one wife.
Okay.
So if you have multiple wives, to resolve conflicts and deal with each of these wives takes a lot of time. So I think that's how I got the time aspect.
Okay, good. I think that's very reasonable. But there is something that is very clear to me or indicative in the verse. Why don't you call in the next person? Let's see what more people have to say.
Okay, I'll call Brother Asif.
Can you repeat the question? Just
sure.
Make sure.
So over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that you will not be able to be just with your wives, right? But in the previous verse, he said that you can marry four if you are just. Over here, most of the people who have agreed that when Allah's talking about justice here, he's talking about justice of the heart, meaning that I'm always going to prefer one wife or the other. So how do we know that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about giving one wife or leaning toward one wife is what he is prohibiting? What does that leaning mean?
The leaning means that well, with marriage, you love the person, so the point is not to ignore them. If you make that commitment to the family that you know you can.
How did you get that from this verse? I'm with you. Like, listen, everything so far is absolutely right. But I want there's something in the verse to tell me that.
In the second part of the verse, it says not to ignore.
Sense. Huh?
But do not ignore one wife altogether.
Right? Ignore her altogether, leaving her suspended. Like, you don't really deal with her as your wife, and you're not spending time with her. And this is very clear from the verse. This is very clear from the verse, and it's very much indicative of the time. MashaAllah, very good. Very good. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he starts talking about talaq. He says, وَأَن يَتَفَرَّقَا يُغْنِي اللَّهُ كُلًّا مِنَ السَّاعَةِ وَكَانَ اللَّهَ وَاسِعًا عَلِيمًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, but if a husband and wife do separate, Allah will provide for each out of his plenty. He is infinite in plenty and wise. Then Allah talks about his power, right? And this is very much related to the previous verses, because usually when a person or a family breaks up or gets out of divorce, they worry about, okay, where is my money going to come out? How am I going to take care of myself? And what am I going to do in this situation? And Allah reminds them that, listen, the reason that you left and you got out of this situation was for Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controls everything in the heavens and the earth, and He will take care of you. And because you did it out of taqwa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to maintain your taqwa. Because of that taqwa, He guided you and He gave you a better situation, and He will continue to take care of you. And He reminds them of His power, He reminds them of His ability, and how He talks about there are certain things that He Azza wa Jal has complete power and full power to do, and He will continue to reward them. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talks about the believers, right? So He finished up those verses talking about what happens when you separate. And then He talks about the believers themselves, saying that you who believe uphold justice and bear witness to Allah, even if it is against yourselves, your parents, or your close relatives. Whether a person is rich or poor, Allah can take care of both. Refrain from following your desires so that you can act justly. If you distort or neglect justly, Allah is fully aware of what you do. And this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's reminder now to those same brothers and to those same sisters, to those husbands and wives, that it's very important that we maintain justice and that we are just because we are just people. Allah has made us as such, and He's ordered us with such. So it's very important that we follow that. It's very important that we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His messenger. It's very important that we follow their example. It's very important that we use them to balance out our scales, and we use them to actually judge and to deal with the different situations that He Azza wa Jal has given us. And He talks about those individuals that leave Islam, the murtaddin, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do with them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also talks about the hypocrites and how He's prepared a punishment for them. Again, part of that dichotomy. He talks about the believers and the promises that they're given, and then He talks about the disbelievers and some of the promises that they are given. And then He talks about, He continues talking about the disbeliever. He talked about the hypocrites, and then He talks about the disbelievers. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says about those who disbelieve, and He starts then talking about some of their characteristics. I think this is something, so here in ayah number 140, you guys should definitely go back to that and read some of these characteristics so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects us from them. And He goes on to talk about the hypocrites as well. And a lot of these discussions are something that are really important for us to stay away from, right? We don't want any of these characteristics. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from having any of these characteristics because there's something that they're completely unhealthy. They're completely negative. They don't bring any khair. They don't bring any good to our relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal. So I think it's really important that we keep a lot of these things in mind when we are dealing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will go on after talking about a lot of these characteristics of the munafiqeen. He Azza wa Jal talks about the people of the book, right? So He goes here from ayah number 148 onward. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, لا يحب الله الجهر بالسوء من القول إلا من ظلم وكان الله سميعا عليما. Allah does not like bad words to be made public unless someone has been wronged. He's all hearing, all knowing, meaning that we should keep things quiet unless somebody's right is taken, right? So if somebody says something wrong, like we shouldn't tell on each other unless somebody's right is taken. We should try to keep things quiet so that people are not they're not punished unjustly. And nobody likes a tattletale, right? Nobody likes a tattletale. Nobody likes a snitch. But it's very important. Islam does encourage telling, and Islam does encourage snitching when others' rights are taken, right? And this is very important. This verse is very clear that لا يحب الله الجهر بالسوء, that Allah does not like bad words to be made public. He doesn't like that we share other people's laundry out publicly. إلا من ظلم, except if somebody's right has been taken, except if somebody has been oppressed. In that situation, you should snitch. In that situation, you should tell, because this is the only way to bring khair, this is the only way to bring barakah. Whether that be done openly, or whether it be secretly, whether it be done by those who are powerful and those who are not, it's very important that we maintain that. And we talk about all those things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then talks about, again, with the believers and how this is from their characteristics. And over here in ayah number 153 onward, this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Ahlul Kitab, and he talks about the book that they were given and how they asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show his face, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he struck them with the thunderbolt because of what they had asked, even after they were given clear revelations. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's punishing the Ahlul Kitab here for asking for something to further fortify their belief, apparently. So how do we know over here that they're doing it because they're being presumptuous, because they're being difficult? How do we know that's the situation here? Asif, why don't you call in the next person?
Brother Adi.
No, you can't. Adi, he's involved with the audio video stuff.
Oh, okay. Brother Hassan.
Could you repeat that again? Sorry.
So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the Jews, where they say to Musa, saying to him, we want Allah to show his face to us. Like, we want to see Allah.
Mm-hmm.
We want to see Allah. And is there a problem with them asking this? And if there is, why? And then we have other examples, like for example from Ibrahim, where he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show him how he brought life to the death.
Mm-hmm.
So why is this a problem here and what they're asking?
I believe if they when they ask this, and if they do get a sign, even after that sign, if they disbelieve, then that's just pure arrogance right there.
Okay, so so my question, maybe I wasn't clear, is it a problem that they asked for this?
Well, actually, in of itself, not really, because they want to look for a sign, right?
Okay, but why did Allah punish them then?
I mean, well, just going back to what I said, if they were given signs, but they still neglected it.
Right. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's not punishing them because they asked this. He's punishing them because they've already been given so many clear signs.
Right.
They're just doing this. And why are they doing this? Are they doing it because they want to increase their iman?
No.
No. They're doing it because they're just being presumptuous, and they're ridiculing, and they're just giving Musa a hard time.
Right.
And Allah, He goes on to the next ayah to talk about more how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave them another sign. After they did that, He struck a thunderbolt. Some of the Mufassirin said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually killed them and brought them back to life as a show of His power. After that, what He did is He lifted a mountain above their heads. And He lifted a mountain above their heads, saying, enter the gate humbly. And some of the Mufassirin, they actually mentioned that they went into sajda, and while they were in sajda, they turned their head sideways looking up at the mountain, right?
Oh.
Because they didn't know what Allah was going to do with them, and they didn't trust that if they submitted to Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would actually let them go. It's just amazing. It's like, it's really amazing. You read some of these stories, and they're just so infuriating. So infuriating. They're so irritating. So some of the things that these guys do along the stack.
I just want to add to that. It also, I mean, I don't know if it's like backed up or not, but like that's also a reason why we're not given the exact date of Laylatul Qadr, right? Because if we were and we still didn't worship on that night, it'd be an act of disobedience, right?
Well, I mean, are we obligated to worship on Laylatul Qadr, or did someone just miss out on a great opportunity?
Someone just missed out on a great
right.
opportunity.
It's not an obligation. It's not from the pillars of Islam, but it is something that we encourage everyone to take advantage of. I mean, how many times do we get the opportunity to do a lifetime of worship in one night, right? Not even the whole day.
Right.
Just the night. And even the night, not even the whole night, not from Maghrib until Fajr, right? From Isha until Fajr. And it's not even that much time. You're talking about what, like 8 hours? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put so much barakah, so much blessing in those 8 hours that he said that this is a lifetime worth of worship.
Right.
It's just missing out an opportunity, and it's not something that is an obligation.
Okay.
Yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned something else that's really interesting here in ayah number 156. After talking about the disbelief of the Jews, he says, وَبِكُفْرِهِمْ وَقَوْلِهِمْ عَلَى مَرْيَمْ بُهْتَانًا عَظِيمًا. And because they disbelieved and uttered a terrible slander against Maryam. What is it that they said against Maryam alayhi salam? Hassan, why don't you call on the next person?
Sister Saifa.
Hello, yes?
Yeah, so over here, when they uttered and they disbelieved and uttered a terrible slander against Maryam, what was it that the Jews said about Maryam?
I'm not 100% sure, but they probably thought that no, she definitely, Isa alayhi salam was not fatherless. He definitely did have a father. She's just hiding it, maybe.
They accused her of adultery.
Correct.
Right? They accused her of adultery. Ahsant, right? MashaAllah, very good. And then they go even further, right? They go even further in the next verse saying, وَقَوْلُهُمْ إِنَّا قَتَلْنَا الْمَسِيحِ عِيسَى ibn Maryam. And we have killed the Messiah, Isa, the son of Mary. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ. But they did not kill him. وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ. And they did not crucify him. وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُ. But somebody of his likeness was appeared to them, or the likening of the situation appeared to them, depending on the reading. وَإِنَّ الَّذِينَ اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ لَفِي شَكٍّ مِّنْهِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those that disagreed about him are full of doubt. مَا لَهُمْ بِهِ مِنْ عِلْمٍ إِلَّا اتِّبَاعَ الظَّنِّ وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ يَقِينًا. With no knowledge to follow, only supposition. They certainly did not kill him. There is a minority of Muslims who say that he was killed, even though these verses are very clear, and that is something that we need to be aware of. But the vast majority of the Sunni scholars say that no, we take this verse upon its apparent meaning, and this is not what happened with the Prophet Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. Continuing on, all of these are just lies, right? They invented all these lies. They say that we killed Isa ibn Maryam. But why did they kill him in the first place? Or why did they, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. Why did they attempt to kill him? Saifa, why don't you call on the next person?
Let me see. Brother Aziz?
Before I answer, I find something very beautiful in this, and also Al Imran. Allah Ta'ala keep clearing the name of Maryam, and it just shows how beautiful. She entrusted Allah for what happened, and after so many years until the day of judgment, Allah Ta'ala took on Himself to clear her name.
Yeah, subhanAllah, that's amazing, right?
It's such a beautiful thing. I mean, when I keep thinking about it, it's just amazing when you're on the side of Allah. No matter who tries to, put a bad name, put a bad deed to your name, but Allah will defend you.
No, subhanAllah. And who is the only other woman who had this honor?
Hazrat Aisha.
Aisha radiallahu anha. SubhanAllah, it's amazing, right? And how they were both accused of adultery. And who cleared them? And who cleared their name?
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Did they do anything to defend themselves?
Nothing.
They did nothing.
They left it to Allah.
Yeah, they left it up to Allah. Yeah, and both of them said, Allah knows what's in my heart, Allah knows what I have done, and Allah will protect me, and that's exactly what Allah did. And it is a way of honor for them. There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt. Why did the Jews want to kill Isa alayhi salam? Or why did they attempt to do so?
It's a similar story what they did with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's they were jealous of him being not from one of his own.
Yeah.
And also, if traditionally, I mean, if you look at it historically, they have killed one prophet after another, so it wasn't something new.
Yes. Right. They're doing what they're known for doing, right? Every time they didn't like a prophet, or every time a prophet spoke against them or challenged them, because this is what Isa was going around. He was going around the different temples, and he was challenging what the rabbis were teaching the people.
Yeah.
And what happened to the rabbis?
What do you mean?
Like, how did they react?
Well, they lose their business. That was another thing.
Right? And you never mess with the man's money, right?
Right.
So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he goes on, he starts talking about, the Jews, and he starts talking about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish them, and how that because of everything that they did. So basically, everything that they did, this is a recompense for what they did. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constantly and continuously punished them. Allah forbade riba on them, but this is what they did, and they devoured people's money, and they devoured people's wealth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he talks about those who are well grounded in knowledge, that these are the ones who have to be different from the Jews, right? If you have knowledge, then you perform the prayers, you pay the zakah, you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the last day, and you will have a great reward, opposite to what happened to the Jews. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reinforces this concept, saying that this religion is the same one that was sent to Noah, it was sent to Ibrahim, it was sent to Ismail, it was sent to Ishaq, it was sent to Yaqub, it was sent to the tribes that followed Yaqub, it was sent to Isa, to Ayyub, to Yunus, to Harun, to Sulaiman, to Dawood, and even to Dawood we gave the Zabur, we gave the Psalms, and other messengers that we mentioned to you, and some we have not mentioned to you. And this is all reinforcement for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Talking, he comes from a long lineage of prophets, and this is something that's really important. And all of these prophets will be a witness, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes witness to the fact that he sent all of these prophets before, and you are not the first prophet to come, but you are the last, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then Allah closes about those individuals who disbelieve and how he will not guide them because they do not seek guidance because of their disbelief and their disobedience. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that they will end up in the hellfire. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the messenger again, right? So he's reinforcing this concept of the messenger and how it is very important to believe in him and to go back to him. And Allah then addresses Ahlul Kitab again, right? Time and time again, you see this conversation going back and forth between the believers and the Ahlul Kitab, talking to the believers, say, okay, you have glad tidings, these things are good for you, these are the things that you need to do. And then going back to the Ahlul Kitab saying, okay, you disbelieved here, these are the mistakes you made, and this is the problems that you caused. And then Allah is specifically here now talking about the Christians, right? So in verse number 171, he's actually talking about the Christians, saying that your belief in the Trinity is false, and it is wrong, and it is completely against what the Masih said, and even the Masih will stand against you, and he will bear witness against you, saying that this is not what I taught the people. And those individuals who believe in the Trinity and who are firm upon that, some of them are disdainful, some of them are arrogant. Allah will punish all of those people. So we have to understand that Allah has sent this convincing proof. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent all of these proofs, and he sent all of these verses, and it's very important to keep all of those in mind. Now, what's interesting here is in the last verse, and we're going to close with this, inshallah. I know I went a little bit over in time. Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, they ask you for a ruling. Say, Allah gives you a ruling about inheritance from someone who dies childless with no surviving parents. If a man leaves a sister, she is entitled to half of the inheritance. She has no child, etc. To the end of the verse. Where does this verse, the verse, if we look at it alone, where should it be placed? Aziz, where do you, can you call in the next person, please?
Brother Hassan?
Dang, I've been getting called a lot today.
They keep hoping you're gonna come out of your food coma.
I was hungrier today.
It's alright, I'm starting to get used to it sometimes.
Let's see. So, just looking at the ayah alone, you're asking where it should have been placed in the surah?
Yeah, based on what the verse is talking about, where should this have gone?
God gives you believe on so this should have been, I think, right when he was talking about, wealth and distributing it.
Right, where he was talking about inheritance.
Right.
And inheritance is all the way in the beginning of the surah.
Right.
So what happened here? Like, how come this verse, it just feels like it's just placed out of nowhere and just put here at the end?
I feel like it's just a reminder again.
MashaAllah. A reminder for what?
Just about, dealing with the weak and the oppressed.
MashaAllah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's closing the verse with the theme of the verse. With the theme of the surah. And MashaAllah, Ahsan, excellent. And it really is beautiful. If you look at it superficially, you're like, wait, what does this have to do?
Yeah.
You're talking about Al-Kitab and the believers, and all of a sudden you're talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ is asking Allah for a ruling. They asked the Prophet ﷺ for a ruling, so Allah sends down one about inheritance. Right? And it feels so random, it feels so out of place. But if you think about the theme of the surah, and if you think about what is being discussed in the surah, it really is a beautiful way to close it.
Right.
It really is a beautiful way to close it, because it is meant to be a reminder to make sure that everybody gets their right and not to abuse your authority.
Right.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair. See that? So alhamdulillah, I'm glad you woke up.
Maybe I won't be so hungry tomorrow.
Right. Is there any questions or any comments before we end? Because we have hit the end time now. Alhamdulillah, we finally finished Surah Nisa. From tomorrow, inshallah, we'll be doing Surah Maidah.
We made it farther than the last 3 Ramadans.
Allahu Akbar.
At this point last year, we were still on the 3rd ayah of Surah Baqarah.
Yeah. Something like that.
We were super in depth though, not gonna lie.
Yeah. No, I mean, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, you're doing a good job. This is really good. I really like it.
Jazakallah khair. Class, if you do guys have any questions, make sure that you note them down, and then we can talk about them at the beginning of class tomorrow, okay?
All right.
So I will see all of you tomorrow, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Jazakumullah khair. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.